All right, Knights of Apollo, what's up, guys? Hope you're doing well. And today we have a super exciting video. We have an interview with the CEO of Credenzio Studios, who is working on Lionhearts. It's an MMO RPG that is player driven. We've got trade, religion, military, conquest, diplomacy, all player driven, set in the Middle East, the Crusades. And I think this is going to be really, really exciting. And I think it's going to really resonate with you guys. And that is why I am just promoting it, because it sounds awesome. This is not a paid sponsorship or anything like this. This is just because I genuinely want to see this game come to fruition, because we're really lacking these types of games. And, you know, I have more faith in indie games than I do with AAA titles. So that is why I really want to support this and show you guys what this game is about. Now, if you guys know Lionheart's Crusade, that is their original game that they've been working on. It is on Roblox. I've covered it a couple times. The video's got a ton of views, and I think there was a lot of interest there, but they feel very limited from the Roblox engine, and there's a lot of different issues with it. So they are going and they're making their game over from the ground up. They've been running that game for like 10 years, so they have a lot of experience and they've learned a lot. So these are all things that we're going to talk about in today's interview. But before we go into this interview, I just want to quickly promote all the different links you can go to support this game. So first off, there's a Steam link where you can go and wishlist the game. Guys, that's huge. Wishlisting games it's free, and it really helps the developers. To their Kickstarter, which is not launched yet, but you can look at it and get an idea of what it's all about. So be sure to bookmark that, follow that. They also have a website where you can learn more about the game. It's very early in its development, so they don't have a ton of footage, but they are working on it. I think right now they're working on a demo. So they are working hard, and they want to raise some money. And the more money they raise, obviously, the better, and the more dense the game will be. So we're talking about all of that. If you guys have any questions, be sure to leave some comments. I'm sure they're going to be in the comments answering any kind of questions, any kind of concerns, or anything like that. So be sure to check that out. This looks really promising, and I really do want it to come to fruition. So please listen to the interview, support it if you want. If this sounds like something you would enjoy, again, if you have the ability, even if you don't, I don't even mean necessarily a financial support, but I mean like just like it, just wish list it. I mean, that's free, right? You can do that and it supports it. But yeah, if you have a couple bucks you can throw towards the project, that's awesome too. So thank you guys so much for watching, and enjoy the interview. All right, Knights of Apollo, what's up, guys? Hope you're doing well. And today we are doing something a little bit different. We're not playing a game. We're going to be talking about a new game. So here with me is Kohlton from Credenzio Studio. He is working on a new up-and-coming game that I think you guys will be very much interested in, called Lionhearts. So, yeah.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Pixel. I appreciate it. We're working on a game up and coming on Steam called Lionhearts. You may be familiar with our game on Roblox. We made Lionhearts Crusade, so this is somewhat of a sequel.
Right, yeah. So you guys have started a Kickstarter. You've got a Steam page. So everybody can, again, links in the description. You can go and find out more about the game. But the reason I'm interested in interviewing you, and I think why you're interested in being interviewed by me, is because I think my community would be very much into a game like this. So very quickly, for maybe some players who haven't heard of your Roblox style game, what is Lionhearts going to be about?
Yeah, so the Roblox game, it's like I said, it's a predecessor in setting and theme, but the new up and coming game on Steam is going to be very unique, and even the core gameplay loop is going to be very original. We're learning all the things we did with Lionheart's Crusade and trying to improve and redo them even better in the sequel. So I would say the game's about uh, becoming a medieval knight. If you choose, there's three different main branches. You can be in the military branch, the religious branch, or the trade branch. And the idea is you gain favor in your kingdom to rank up the hierarchy and earn different rewards. The really unique thing about Lionhearts is the player control and player freedom that everybody can experience is really going to be like unlike anything else. And it's an MMORPG. So unlike some other medieval games like Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, it's going to be multiplayer, and the kingdoms are actually made up of entirely players. So we're not relying on NPCs or scripted mechanics. Everything's going to be organic, meaning if I conquer your territory and you're in another kingdom, that territory stays. Or if I become king, I'm the only king of this whole kingdom. And there's not a million kingdoms, there's a set amount. So titles and land have actual importance and weight, and they have supply and demand. So there's only a limited quantity, giving them even more value than, let's say, a procedurally generated world or something with infinite copies.
Yeah, it sounds very ambitious. It sounds extremely like very interesting for most players, especially players like me that love to role play, love to get lost in a medieval world. So it, as you said, it was a Roblox game.
Yeah,
What is the major reasons why you've decided to make this a standalone game and not use like the Roblox system or engine?
sure. Yeah, so I've had this dream to make this game for about 10 years. And so we've been working on it, designing it. And the vision at the core hasn't changed, but the circumstances and everything around it has changed. How do we adapt this? How do we make this fun? How do we make this as enjoyable as possible? It's one thing to have a very ambitious idea that sounds cool, it's another thing to execute it. And so what we've done with the Roblox game, which is still up, it's called Lionhearts Crusade on Roblox. You can play it now. The thing about the Roblox game, it has a lot of the core mechanics that we want to do. It has the directional combat. It has factions, not kingdoms. And these factions have persistent world territory conquest where they vie over territory, and has an active player base. And those are the things we executed on very well. The issue is the Roblox platform is very aged down. So all of our players are way older than the typical Roblox player, and the market for medieval games doesn't exist on Roblox to the extent it does on Steam. For example, the largest medieval game on Roblox averages about 1,000 concurrents at its best. And on Steam, it's much, much higher. Furthermore, just from a business perspective, Roblox players don't spend or uh, drive profits nearly as much as Steam players just because they're so much younger and it's not the culture there. So when you're trying to build a viable business around a very ambitious game, something like Roblox is actually not ideal for an aged up audience. Furthermore, the technical restraints on Roblox are very limiting. We've had to do a lot of things that something like Unreal Engine, which we're working on now, just has built in. We've had to go around and circumvent. And it's been a good learning experience for us, but it's caused a lot of performance issues and other problems that haven't allowed us to scale the game the way we wanted to. And what this opportunity on Steam does is it allows us to actually find the perfect audience and market at this right demographic for something that can be a sustainable business model, and also allow us to achieve our full dreams with this project, not limiting it because of the engine. We're always We've always been trying to fit Lionhearts into the Roblox box and change the audience of Roblox to come to Lionhearts, but Roblox is just too limited right now with its audience, whereas something like Steam just already has the things we need. So it would have been nice to start on there originally, but we didn't. And it was a great actually learning experience and way like, hey, can we get a minimum viable product? Can we get a demo out? Can we test these ideas out in like a in an environment that allows players to come in? And we have years of data for balancing and testing and seeing what works and what doesn't. And in that way, the project was very fruitful. And now it's pointed us in a direction where we can say, hey, what do we need exactly to do for the Steam game to make it the best possible experience for players? And one of our values at Credenzio Studios is giving more in value than we charge. So we want players to, first of all, no gotcha mechanics, nothing exploitative monetarily. We want players to feel so enriched by the experience that the money they put in is well worth it. And that's what we want to do. And it's very difficult to do that on Roblox, and it's still difficult to do that on Steam because making games is incredibly difficult, if anybody knows. But we've learned so much, and I think we're really aptly prepared and situated to make this move.
Okay, yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, I have limited experience on Roblox, but from my little experience, it seems like those games are very shallow. Like they're very much like a lot of them
Yeah,
feel like clones of real games that I
yeah,
guess like a younger audience can play. But yeah, I mean, based on the sound of the game, what's going to be possible in the game, it makes good sense to switch over to Steam and kind of and in a way start over. You have the mechanics there, and so let's talk about that a little bit, just in case there's any kind of confusion of like what this game is trying to build, what kind of experience you're trying to create here. I don't want to say, I feel like this is a cheesy way of explaining it, but what are some other games that have aspects of it that you're trying to do? That, because this is very ambitious, and really I don't see a lot of games like this.
Oh,
And
it's
I
a totally fair point.
right,
Yeah.
right,
And
right.
I think it's funny because I'm actually not a typical MMORPG player. And so when I describe it as an MMORPG, it almost feels wrong because it's not going to have those mechanics that a typical MMO like Elder Scrolls Online or Guild Wars 2 would have. And I think I made a mistake in the past where, like, okay, we're going to make an MMORPG by definition, but the themes and the mechanics are very unique. And so we tried to fit everything into one box in the Roblox game, like a story and quests. And I realized that those really don't have anything to do with what Lionheart should be. So when you talk about comparable titles, something like Eve Online with like a player economy, that's a good example. Something like Bannerlord Persistent World, the mods that have come out with that, that's a good example. And it's less of like, hey, this is a game just like this. It's like a roguelike or it's a Souls-like game. It's going to be something all on its own, which is ambitious. So we're taking elements from a lot of games that we take inspiration of, but ultimately, what we're trying to do is create a very authentic, player-driven feudal hierarchy society. It's almost like a simulator. It's like a multiplayer simulator where you and your friends can rise up in a kingdom and actually change and build the world. And because we're not going to have multi servers, it's going to be some of the modern sci-fi games. Like if I'm outside this planet in one position, I know if anybody else is there in the whole world, they'll show up at that spot. It's going to be like that. If you're at the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem, you're going to be there with everybody else who's at that spot. And we're going to use modern technology and stuff. So the world feels super connected. It's like you're going to the Holy Land. And when you buy a plot of land, that's the only copy of that plot and it's unique. And so what this does is it presents a lot of challenges from the developing side and it presents a lot of concerns from the player side. How do you execute something like that? And we have really cool ideas and technology we're going to implement it to make it work. Furthermore, we've tested this out in Crusades, so we actually know exactly where it goes wrong. And so it sounds ambitious because it is, but we've been working on refining it and making it as suitable as possible so it can work. And that's what we're going to make happen on Steam.
Yeah, yeah, that's you make a great point with Eve Online and Bannerlord and how it has traces of elements in all of that. I guess a good way. So let's imagine, like someone who's never even heard of those games. They're into medieval, they're into role playing. What what will it be like? Because this is, and like you said, this would be a very player driven world.
Uh-huh.
So I'm logging on, I'm getting on, the world is my oyster. I don't know what's going on. Like I know there's a lot to the game, but like quickly, what are my paths? What are my options? How can I
Yeah.
make a name for myself in this this experience?
Yeah, so I think a good parallel here is, I'm sure you played Chivalry 2,
Yep.
and they obviously have the two main guilds, the Masons, and I forget the other one, but
Agatha, yeah, yeah.
yeah, so you're fighting, and you either get assigned Mason or Agatha, and you fight these battles, and then you switch teams, and it's like, well, am I Mason or am
Yeah.
I Agatha? And like,
Right.
where are my loyalties? I'm not going to buy a banner of Agatha and put it on my wall because I could be Mason
Right.
next time, right? So what we're doing is we're giving like a sense of almost like nationalism and loyalty to your kingdom. So when you start like fresh player experience, right? We have all these ideas. How do we boil it down to what we'd call like a vertical slice, like just a little piece? So when you're a new player, you're not completely overwhelmed, which is a big issue. And so what you do is you choose a kingdom and you decide what do you want to do. You actually don't have to be a warrior and you don't have to be in a religious tree or a trade tree. You only really need to choose one, or you could be a little bit of all. It just depends on what you want to do. So when you start, it could be as simple for a casual player of queuing up for a battle, like in Chivalry 2. The difference is that if you lose the battle, it actually has consequences on your kingdom, versus if you win the battle, it benefits your kingdom. So something like Helldivers kind of plays with this idea. The difference with Helldivers is it's not PvP and it's scripted. So actually, there's a game master, sort of like the Hunger Games, who kind of decides which aliens are getting stronger. We're not doing any of that. The players are going to decide what kingdoms are doing what. If a kingdom's in decline because its king is doing a bad job, there are consequences to that. On an individual player level, however, you still get to have fun and stay focused on your individualistic goals while ascending inside the collective hierarchy, which is going to be the more medical, I would say, the more overarching theme. Similarly, it's not a standard MMORPG because the goal isn't actually to gain experience and level up your character. It's to become a lord. It's to become a higher status. It's a status ascension game. So when you start at a serf, that's like level 1. When you get to a king, that's like level 999, right? The difference is not everybody can become a king because there's limited slots. Everybody can become a knight, which is basically late game. But to become a lord, that requires you having parcels of land, and those have limited supply. So I'm not sure if that kind of makes sense towards your question, but
Yeah, no, it does because so, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but essentially it's a world that the amount of effort you put in is what you're going to get back. So
yes,
if you want to hop on and you're like, I don't really want to spend the hours grinding and doing this and do it. I just want to fight battles. You
yeah,
can. You can just
yes,
hop on and play. If you're someone that's like, I don't want to be a king or a lord. I just want to be a baker.
yeah,
Like it's kind of like real life. It's like I don't want to be president of the United States, but
right,
I'd like to run a bakery. That'd be kind of cool, in a sense. Um,
yes.
so there's a system in place that allows players to kind of pick and choose the kind of experience they
Yeah.
want. Yep.
Most players in Lionheart's Crusade, we have these persistent factions. They're not run by NPCs, they're player run. Most players do not want to become king. It's like a part-time, if not a full-time job. So very ambitious people who have like great leadership and charisma, they find themselves in those positions. A lot of them don't work out because it's a very demanding job. It's
Yeah.
very difficult. So the goal is not actually to become the king. It's what do you want out of the game? Like being a baker, you're contributing to your kingdom is actually very vital. You need bread to bring to supplies on the next siege because bread is what determines how many respawns your team gets. So every single position in society is oriented towards the kingdom's goals. Now, if you don't want to grind for 20 hours a week, that's fine because we're making each level of the hierarchy fun.
Right.
And there are other goals besides ascending the hierarchy, just like building your own personal wealth, establishing a guild company. Like I want to be a company of bakers. And similarly, we have systems where if you don't feel like playing the game for 20 hours a day to keep up, we actually have a system that I've really wanted to talk about, which is called the shadow system, which is really what's going to make this whole game work from a technical perspective. Because if you think about it, when a player logs off in a typical MMO, the character disappears from the world. But we're trying to build a world. Characters don't just disappear. You don't just fade out of your chair right there when you
I
log
hope
out of
not.
life, right?
Yeah.
No, no. I mean, unless you die, which we don't want, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're actually going to be able to assign your character tasks to do while you're offline, including going to a battle. So if there's an unscripted battle at 4 a.m. at your lordship, someone's attacking your lordship, well, great. I'm going to assign my character to be there if anybody shows up. So no matter what, me and my retinue are going to be there defending it if I'm not physically present. And when I log in, I'm going to show up exactly where my character was, where I assigned it to be. So if I come in mid battle, boom, I'm in the middle of the battle logging in, and the shadow becomes your actual physical presence. Similarly, you'll have back tasks. So if you're a baker, I've stocked up a bunch of grain. I'm just going to have my character make bread while I'm offline until it runs out. So I could check in a couple times a week and produce a ton of bread. I don't need to be grinding all day long. Of course, people who work harder and spend more time in game are going to have advantages. You can't get rid of that. Like your shadow's not going to be as efficient. He's not going to be as good of a fighter as you are potentially, right? But it's still
Hopefully.
serviceable enough that the world works. Yeah, exactly. And if you have a bakery and let's say you have a full-time job and you can log on twice a week, it's like, okay, well, is Pixel's Bakery only open from 6 to 8 on Tuesdays and Thursdays? Like that's not a good business.
Yeah.
No, no. So somebody can show up and interact with your character and do the things you've assigned. And maybe even we've flirted with the idea of having like you train an AI model to respond the way you want to respond and assimilate your characteristics. So in practice, your character exists in the world permanently. It's a part of the world. and you just shade into that character when you can, and you give it other tasks and assign it other things, and it interacts and engages in the world. And that way, we're even considering, do we even need NPCs at all? Or can we just allow players to establish these characters so the world really feels alive and lived in a way that we as developers could never make it on our own?
Right. No, that the shadow idea sounds genius because that is one of the biggest issues with these types of games is the issue of people just like they're really active for like a week
Yeah.
and then something happens. Maybe they have a baby or they get a new job or whatever.
Right.
And then it's just ghost town.
Yeah.
And you'll have clans of players that just they're gone.
Yeah.
And yeah, so and that's an issue with Bannerlord Persistent Empire or World
Yeah.
where it's just you got oh you want to declare war, you got to wait till everybody gets on. There's all these rules and all these different different rules that you have to wait for. You can't do this, you can't do
Oh,
that.
it's a disaster. I mean,
Yeah,
and this is one of the ideas that comes out of years of trial and like we know about this issue so well.
right,
Um, the core loop in Lionheart's Crusade on Roblox is actually the territory conquest, which is one of the biggest issues with it because the territory conquest is only open twice a day. It's on a 12-hour cycle and the battle's open for 90 minutes and it rotates around the clock. So there's accessibility for people in different time zones. But if you're not on at 4 a.m., people set their alarms for 4 a.m. to go to a battle and they just get so burned out. And also from a game design perspective, you can't design the core loop around gated times. Like if I'm at work at that time, I can't go to the big battle. It just doesn't work. And so we've designed the system and territory conquest and all these things so they're not scripted and they're not at certain times, but we also have these systems like the shadow system where if you can't be there, okay, I know my character's there. I gave him a cast Damascus battle axe. He's going to hold his own. He's going to be kicking ass. Oh, my buddy's just sent me a video. My character's just wiped the whole squad. He's out there. He's swinging his, and if you were there, you might be doing a little better because you're not an you're not an
yeah,
NPC. But at the same time, when somebody comes and attacks your lordship, they're like, "Oh my gosh, that's where Pixel's character is." Like, there's no safety because your character. It doesn't matter if it's the middle of the night. Your character wants to defend his keep. He doesn't want the keep to get sacked.
right,
It doesn't matter if you're at work. He's gonna come outside the front door with his battle axe and give everything he can.
right,
And if you've done the good things in preparation, you've stocked the granary, you've stocked the armory, you've got good communication with your retinue, so their characters are assigned to it. Um, it's not perfect because you can still lose your territory, but at the same time, it's a much better system for managing the realities of life with these games. You can't live in this game. I don't want people to live in the game. I don't want people to spend 24 hours in the game. I want people to live too, right?
right,
So it's systems like this from the years of faction leaders, exactly what you said. We have faction leaders who they're goaded for a month and they rally 90 soldiers and they conquer the whole map. And then the next month they failed an exam because they were too busy playing the game and their empire crumbles. And that's not
right,
very stable, right?
right,
So we're implementing systems like this to make it as stable as possible so that you as a player, you can come in, manage your tasks, and then boom, I'm going to come back in on Thursday, check in, restock the granary so I can keep making bread, or I'm going to, rebuild the defenses from whatever got sieged. And if I want to just play casually, we have a skirmish system, which is not persistent territory conquest, but I can go sabotage an opponent's wall. I can go steal from their granary. So it's more minor effects and buffs on like what you're getting to your kingdom versus what you're taking, but it's still enough consequence that it feels impactful. So more impactful than, let's say, a Chivalry 2 battle, but not so impactful where it's like you're stressed out because if you lose this battle, you just lost your 3-month kingdom and
right.
you have to regain everything. So we're working on solutions for all this stuff, and it only comes from, again, like 10 years of trial and error on this, trying to figure out what works and what problems there are.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And so the shadow feature, does that work too? So say that your king calls a crusade, can your character go on a war march with him like as a shadow
Yeah.
like
Yes.
okay, so would that be like an option to could you say like only do defense or
Yeah, I haven't specified that specifically.
okay.
I think there's going to be some drawbacks at every step. Like you can't just, for example, when you go on a march, when you go on a crusade, that's called a military convoy. And a convoy has to be supplied with bread and provisions. Like I said, every time somebody dies, they can only respawn if there's enough food. So it's not a
Right.
hunger system. The food that people grow is actually how you respawn at a battle.
Okay.
So your character could respawn only as many times as there's actual bread. Similarly, if you're sieging a place, the granary, it's not a convoy. The granary that's actually at the keep also has to be stocked. Um, but as far as setting certain things for your character, certainly you can do that. Things are a lot more localized. So when you're a part of a kingdom, the first step, if you're in the military route, which is what I think a lot of people will do and what's probably most attractive to most people, is you actually join something called the National Retinue, which is the monarch's personal retinue, which is a group of soldiers. Okay. But if you have a group of friends, you want to be a part of their retinue. So the first step you would do is probably leave the national retinue and join one of your friends' retinue, or if you're a lord, start your own retinue. And actually, that's like a micro faction within the kingdom. And because of a feudal system's like a triangle, right? You have the monarch, you have the lords and the nobility, then you have the knights, and then you have the serfs and the laymen and all that.
Right.
So you actually report one step up the chain. So for example, if you have a lord and you're a part of his retinue, your priority is actually going to be serving that lord. His priority is serving his duke, whose priority is serving the monarch, and it goes up the chain. So
Right.
when a monarch calls a war, he's calling all of his dukes and their lords' retinues to battle. But the dukes on their own also have their own political ties and concerns and things within their microcosm. And what that allows is sort of decentralized command. Because if the monarch is having to report on every single soldier in his kingdom and keep track of it, it's not going to work. It's going to be modular. So a retinue is going to be made up of the soldiers and friends. So it's basically like starting your own kingdom within the kingdom, which allows players to feel a lot more connected. And
Like a
it's
clan
like
almost.
exactly just
Yeah.
like a clan. Speaking of, that's like one of the things we tried in Lionheart's Crusade, which we're not going to add because we're fixing it with retinues. Like that's what we're doing. How can we make a clan within a faction, within a kingdom, so that players feel connected while still serving that higher goal? And then you can imagine a retinue has its own little uniforms that, are
Sigil
in
and
line with the
yeah.
king. Exactly. So your number one priority is going to be defending your retinue, and your number two priority is going to be defending the kingdom, just as
That's
far as proximity goes.
I love that because it's like you're making a game mechanic that is in line with how history was, how that system of government, the feudal system. So I love that fusion, and that is really that I think that's an important thing to bring up too, because like if you got a bunch of friends that are like, I want to do this, but I don't really want to have to answer to like some random player I don't know or
Right.
the king. I'd rather just answer to my friend who's like the guy who's on all the time, so he's like a lord. So
Right.
yeah, that sounds so much better. And again, historical. I mean, people
Right.
usually just fought for their lords who were like right above them.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like imagine, you're in the military and you see President Trump come by. That's like seeing a monarch in game. They're like celebrities,
Right, right.
right? It's not like the day to day. The monarch's not going to know everybody in his kingdom. And he's actually probably going to be more familiar with his dukes and lords directly, probably a few members in his national retinue, but the hierarchy all works in a localized system. Like your specific unit in your military, and you answered your specific captain or commander in a real life sense. It's going to be just like that with retinues and lords. So you're focused way more on who's your brotherhood of friends and soldiers in your retinue. That's gatewayed. That's actually kept very tight knit, and your lord has a lot of control over that. And similarly, a duke can revolt against a king if he doesn't like what he's saying. That's what happened in real life. So
Right.
it's much less top down and a lot more modular. That being said, the king has the most power. He is the most powerful position. He can do a lot of things, but like that idea of like him micromanaging everybody and you don't even know who he is, it's not really going to act like that and function like it's not going to function that way.
Right, right. Which I think, yeah, again, I think that's it's like a big world, but you live in a small world, you know.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
yeah. So I'm sure we could talk about that for hours, but just to be able to cover everything, one of the one thing that really piqued my interest is the system of religious systems game.
Yeah,
So how exactly is religion gonna play a part in this
sure.
experience?
That's another reason we moved to Steam. It's just the religious concept on Roblox is a little too mature for their terms of service as well. And that's something I've been dreaming of adding for years. So a kingdom is actually made up of three branches. We've only really discussed military, but there's also trade and religion. And all three branches come together to make a kingdom work. So if you're thinking from a classic RPG stance, this isn't a perfect analogy, but religion's more like that mage class, right? Now, that's not exactly how it worked practically historically. So how do we bridge that? So the religion is top down, just like a monarch and the retinues. It's made up of dioceses and a religious leader. The religious leader is actually, along with the trade master, which I'll talk about in a little bit, he's the only one that doesn't have to answer to a monarch. He's actually intra kingdom. So there's a political overlap between like the Pope and the King of France, right? They have to kind of work together because
Right.
France is Catholic, but the Pope, if they have a dispute, there's a little bit of tension there because the Pope's managing his religion across kingdoms.
Right.
Under him are the archbishops who manage the religion within that kingdom. So they actually serve the monarch and the Pope. They do both, and then they manage their different dioceses within that kingdom. So just like a retinue, there are local religious dioceses that are tied to different areas. So if you're a priest or a bishop, you can start your own diocese. And what's the core mechanic? Like fighting is the core mechanic of military. Well, it's this prayer system we've come up with. So it's going to be a directional way in which players, again, this is optional. You don't have to choose the religious path, but players can perform prayers, which are historical. And if they perform them in sequence, you basically have to memorize them in real life and you have to
Right.
perform them in sequence. And then that gives your character a buff. And if you're a priest or a bishop, it gives a surrounding buff, either if you're cutting down a tree or preparing for battle or whatever you're doing. Furthermore, entering the religious arc, there's a buff to it, like you get extra perks, but you also have a sin counter because you're more morally aware. So when you commit sinful acts, you have to go absolve them at a at a church or a cathedral, which is one of the ways that the religions sort of counterbalance the rest of the game. So something like the Knights Templar, they're technically not a kingdom, they're a military order.
Right.
And so you can't actually become a Templar without also being a monk because Templars were monks.
Right.
And so for them specifically, their feudal tree is just two branches, whereas everybody else's is three. And what that allows is essentially merging the religion and the military in that context. But for a regular kingdom like France, I become a layman, then I could become a deacon, and then I could become a priest or a monk, and I unlock new skills like writing or different basically incantations like different prayers and different things, and they become more and more powerful. And the idea here is to make the mechanic, first of all, number one, fun. You never want to sacrifice fun for realism.
Right.
And two, you want to make it practical and useful within the kingdom. You don't want to just have it to have it, because having it to have it sounds nice, but if it's not actually performing any function,
People are
no
gonna
one's
ignore
going to
it.
do
Yeah.
it. Yeah, so I imagine a lot of players are not going to go for the religious path, but it's going to be very important and supplementary towards the rest of the game. And they're going to provide a vital function within society. Furthermore, at like the very top, like I said, there's a political dynamic between the religious leaders and the monarchs, which gives interwoven power spheres within a kingdom.
Right.
So it's something that you have to keep note of.
That's really fascinating. I like the idea of, you say you don't think a lot of people will go, which is true historically, right? I mean, how many people went into the priesthood? Um,
Well, it's tough because so you have the three branches. You can only specialize in one. You can't be a lord and a trade master and and a priest. Okay,
right.
but you can be a lord and a
That
deacon.
dabbles. Yeah.
Right, you can be a deacon and you can be a craftsman, but you can't be three or two of this like high up, right? You have to specialize in either military, trade, or religion. For example, just like in religions, in trade, we have guild companies, which is basically like a real company that produces a certain craft and has various jobs in it. And in order to start a guild company, you basically have to be the equivalent of a lord in the trade section, just like starting a retinue. But if I'm in a guild company or if I'm a guild master, right? I could still fight in a battle. I can still be a knight or a soldier. I just can't also be a lord. That's just one of the ways we balance the
Right.
hierarchy.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's essentially you get to a certain level where it's like, once I pick this, it kind of closes off.
Locks it. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. But
You
you
could
can
have been
still like if you still want to be a baker, you can still be a baker. It's just, you can't have a extreme high position in terms of trade.
Yeah, you can't do them simultaneously. I mean, we're probably gonna it's gonna be more tangible. Like you could abandon your post and like try to go somewhere else afterwards, but you can't pursue. And this is late game only. So for the first, X amount of hours of gameplay, you can pursue all three paths as much as you want. There's just a certain point in late game because the perks and the responsibilities are so massive, you have to specialize.
Yeah, it makes sense. Um, in terms of the religious branch, I think a lot of people would be interested in being warrior monks. I think that's for sure. So there, how many? What are all the different religious or religions that you
Yeah.
can you can join?
We're we're planning 4 or 5 right now. Basically Roman Catholic or just Catholic, uh, Christian Orthodox, Sunni Muslim, and Shiite Muslim. Because those are the 4 religious groups that we're contending in this area. And the game is set in the Crusades. It's set in the Holy Land. It's not in Europe. And each of these religions, they have, for balance, like the tiers are structured the same, but they're customized. And so, we're obviously going to do our best to respect every religion and make sure that we're representing them, and we're going to work with people of all religions and historical experts to make sure we're doing it the best way possible, while also still balancing fun and balance and
Right,
being practical. So if you're in one of the things like you don't get to just choose your religion. Your religion is based on what kingdom you're in,
right.
right? Or else you'd be labeled a heretic. This
Yeah,
is
yeah,
prior
yeah, yeah.
to,
That makes
the age
sense.
of religious freedom.
Yeah,
So if you're in the Ayyubid Sultanate, then you will be is you'll be a Muslim, right?
right.
And that's your church. I speak when I say church or like
Generally,
cathedral or
yeah,
bishop, those are just generalist terms that should apply across religions. Obviously they don't, but there's not a term, religious leader is kind of a more universal term. That
right,
could be the monk or, the head of Islam or the head of the Orthodoxy, which would be the patriarch. So
right,
I try to use more generalist terms, but it's tough at every level.
right, right. Oh, that's fascinating. That's really, I mean, that's cool from even just learning about, different religions and different prayers and I think that would be,
I'm so excited about the prayer mechanic
yeah.
because um, I'm a person of faith myself, but I would love the opportunity to learn some of the Psalms and memorize them like Duolingo, but in game.
Yeah,
And instead of it just being for like XP on an app, I'm casting a spell basically on myself to enhance things. So
right,
and then I can whip out the prayer in real life because I actually memorized it.
right, right,
Right, like one we're playing with, we're gonna have a demo of a video of soon displays like the Lord's prayer, like the Our Father prayer. So you
right.
can imagine Our Father who art in heaven, right?
Oh,
And you
I
have to pick
see.
the right direction. So there's like
Right.
a 4 multiple choice. And then in the game, your character will actually be reciting it.
Oh,
And
that's cool.
depending on his stats, he's either giving himself a buff or he's doing a blessing for everybody around him, depending on how advanced he is in the skill tree. So you can imagine these both warrior monks, but also just like priests who come along with battle. They're going to
Right.
bless this battalion before they go into battle. Um, and you'd be surprised. I mean, people do this in the Crusade game despite not having the mechanics. Like I
Oh,
went
yeah, yeah.
on Easter, I think, or Good Friday last year. I went to Acre to the cathedral, and there was this massive mass, and there was a priest giving, and he was doing an actual sermon and doing the actual Catholic liturgy, just role playing. And I actually
Wow,
I
wow.
thought it was pretty awesome. I put a live stream of it on my YouTube channel. But imagine that, but actual mechanics and ways to participate in it that give real buffs.
That would be, yeah, that is really cool. I did something like that. I did like a special event on Bannerlord, and it was Crusader Knights charging into like Muslim Knights. And
Yeah.
when I was a Crusader Knights, I had someone do a prayer. Like people love it. Like they love to like get, you know, to LARP or even take it serious, like whatever. Like I think it's really cool. And like you said, to make it worthwhile, to make it so it actually does something for the kingdom, will promote, I think, more people to go into it. Are the monks gonna have like a healing ability? Uh,
Yeah, we've flirted with that idea.
like they run a hospital, or something.
Yeah, I mean the Hospitallers for sure.
Yeah,
That was their role. So we're still exploring that. I mean, one of the things we're looking at is specifically like writing. Like, what role could writing play? Because that's actually something that monks did for hundreds, if not thousands, of years. That served a very important role. They were the educated ones.
Right.
So, what role could writing have? I don't know yet. That's like a mechanic we're
Recording the
still.
history, writing the
Right. Yeah,
treaties.
that
Yeah.
exactly. Or, yeah, signing a treaty, all sorts of stuff. And, making mechanics for things like that. I think I showed you at one point this 4-page treaty the players of Lionheart's Crusade had signed after like a
Yes.
global world war,
Yeah.
and they all had their custom insignias, and it was a Google Doc, and it was so cool. But what if that was in game? What if that was a feature? What if that was something that they could do in game? I mean, that just really excites me, and the potential of players actually dictating and determining the terms of the world, where we just set broad parameters for them to operate in, and then they just go for it, and they'll do a much better job than we will at actually executing.
Right. Yeah. Or declaring war and
Yeah.
sending to the enemy. Like, I think, yeah, that I like that. I like that what you said there about, doing it on Roblox and seeing what players do. Like, even if it's not a mechanic, you see like holding a mass or writing a treaty, and then you're trying to figure out ways to implement it in the game to where it's not just a LARP or a role play, but there's an actual feature. So I really like that. I know a big question that people are going to ask is how exactly are the wars going to work? How will territory be conquered, especially if I'm part of a lord and we've worked hard on this territory and then someone comes in and just takes us out? How does that process work?
Yeah. So one of the keys to this is that decentralized command idea. And that's something I've been playing with a lot. And reason I've been so much harping on this is because the problem with persistent world territory conquest is when you lose, it's devastating. And it
Yeah,
just makes people not want to fight, right?
right.
Because I just worked for 3 months on this lordship and I lost it.
Or not attack if you think about it
Right.
because
Or
they don't
they'll
want
just
to.
be, yeah, they'll be
Yeah,
super passive.
yeah,
So one solution to this is making it very there's a defender's advantage. To take a keep is very difficult. It takes a lot of preparation, it takes a lot of supplies. Two is diplomacy. If I conquer your duchy, you're a duke, you don't like your king anyway. Hey, you conquered me, or I just conquered you, let's say. I'll let you keep your lands and all your retinues and lords under you, but now you're French, you're not English, and
right,
this duchy is now French, because I don't want to have to replace all the infrastructure and it's going to be a pain in the ass for me and repair everything. I'll let you do that. You just turncoat. I'll make you that offer. So that'll be up to you. And maybe some of the lords under you don't agree and they want to revolt, right? Um, so there's that aspect to it that'll allow people are more tied to the land, right? You're tied to the land more so than you are the kingdom, which is a big distinction from what we have now. If people are tied to their factions, not the land.
right.
Feudalism is about the land. And
That,
so you could still lose your lordship and somebody could, take it over from you, and hopefully you have the preparation and you can always take it back. And that's part of the excitement of it. If there's no risk and consequence, there's not really as big of a point in making all those defenses and doing anything. But it's a very, very delicate balance of not being too punishing and not being too soft where it doesn't there's no benefit either for the conqueror. So we're working on solutions like the ones I mentioned to just optimize that balance between, hey, I'm just never going to fight because this is too punishing, and just wars all the time, switching hands, like property never gets developed because it's switching hands so much. And I think the military convoy system we've established is sufficient that it's going to take ample preparation and time and execution to pull that off. A siege could even last a very long time. It's not something that's just going to happen in, necessarily an hour. And because of those shadow characters and supplies, you might be sieging a place for weeks.
oh,
Now, that sounds exhausting, right?
yeah,
Um, but it just depends. If you can log off, and I'm trying to balance realism with fun too. I don't want it just to take weeks because it would in real life.
right.
Uh, but if you can log, oh, there's an active siege at Jerusalem. It's been there for a couple weeks. Let's go participate. And there's so much supplies that it just takes forever. And losing a capital city is a much bigger deal than losing like a lordship or a duchy.
Right. No, that makes sense. And that makes it interesting for the king because you want to keep your lords happy and you want to
Yes.
make sure you protect them if they're attacked.
Yeah.
Because if you don't really show up with support, they might be like, hey, this new guy that just conquered us, he seems more organized. He seems he's going to protect us. I think you'll have some players that are like, I'm French no matter what.
Yeah.
If we're conquered by English or German or whatever, I'm just going to leave. And I mean, so what would happen if you're a lord of a region, a province, and you lose it, but you don't want to join the other
No.
side? Do you just like join a new lord and you're under him?
So it depends. Depends on what your lords decided to do. Remember, there are lords, and then they're under dukes, and then they're under monarchs. So
Right.
if you're ideally retinues are close knit enough that most people are unanimous with what the lord decides. But if you're not, you can join another retinue. Okay, I'm moving.
I
The
see.
lord is really the one that owning actual property that has a limit is very limited to nobility because there's so few of it.
Right.
You can take your storage and move it somewhere else very unconsequentially. It's the late game players that are really dedicated that feel the punishment more.
I see.
Yeah. So you can just move to a territory that hasn't been conquered yet. If a kingdom gets conquered, well, it's conquered, it's subjugated. That's not going to happen too often. We're going to make it like very difficult to
Right.
annex an entire kingdom. Um, but at the same time, you could just move back to the capital duchy, join a retinue there. If you're really loyal to your kingdom, I think ideally we're setting it up so the loyalty is primarily to a retinue.
See.
But it's going to be important. There has to be safeguards so that a casual player isn't too disrupted by the events of the world and can still do the active mechanics that they enjoy
Right.
while still feeling a part of the world. Like if somebody comes and burns down your village, it sucks. Like
Yeah.
it's not just like, oh, whatever.
Yeah, no,
It's
I think that will be really interesting too. Is I mean, especially if you're just a humble baker and then your village gets taken over, and now your supplies have to go to a new lord or
yeah.
king. And yeah, I mean, I think that will be fun to role play too. Like maybe you hate it and you know think of
Yeah.
ways to sabotage. Like
Right.
so I think that would be so. Say you take over an enemy lord. Can you put in your own lord? Like,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah. So it and
like you
it
could
really
reward someone with the land.
you could replace yeah, you basically that is the option. You choose as the conqueror. Would I rather keep the existing management to ease bureaucratic overweight from my end, or would I rather my trusted advisors come in and take over?
Right,
There's going to be a limit to how many competent men you have if you start conquering the whole map. At some point,
right.
you're going to
Which
need to,
yeah, it's,
like Napoleon on your back wall there. It's like,
yeah,
once you've conquered all of Europe, at some point you, you know,
yeah.
you have to manage it. You have to, it's one thing to conquer. It's another thing to manage
Maintain.
it and hold.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. No, and that's again historical. I mean, can't expand too quickly, and you'll have chaos. Um. So yeah, no, I like that. Could lords of the same kingdom fight each other?
Yeah, so there'll be rival lordships and rival duchies. They can't war in the same sense, but they can compete in skirmishes. They can, try to sabotage each other. They can jostle for position with their duke or monarch to gain more favor. Similarly, there'll be a tournament system,
Hmm.
and that's a way that knights can sort of display their skill and sort of compete against each other because lordships are going to be limited and dukes are going to be even more limited and monarchs are going to be more unlimited. There's always going to be a competition among them to ascend. If a duke is getting deposed of, the most competent lord will have to be there to take his place. The whole game should be a meritocracy at the top, meaning a casual player can have fun, they can experience the game, they can get to late game, but to become one of the true few in society, you have to have a ton of merit. You have to work hard, and you have to be, probably a brilliant, brilliant politically, brilliant strategically.
Right.
So it just depends on what your goals are as a player. If your
Yeah.
goal is just to be a sick knight who can just, kill anybody and just be the best fighter around with our directional combat, that's possible because it's very skill based.
Right.
It's not just a button masher. Um, you can do that, and you might actually have lords vying to put you in their retinue. Oh, I'll give you this much gold. I'll give you this. I'll give you this. But you don't really want to be a lord yourself. You just want to be the best soldier around. You just want to be a legend, right?
Right.
And that's all you want. And that's a great goal. And I think a lot of players are going to go that route, or want to go that route.
Yeah, no, I think that's and then I assume you could have different lords of different kingdoms fight each other. Maybe they're not at war, like kingdom
Yeah, no,
wide.
for sure.
Yeah.
We have a
Okay.
whole skirmish system. So the skirmish system is basically matchmaking, but in the persistent world. So you can either queue for it, because that way you don't want to just wait until there's a crazy big battle to be able to fight, right? You can actually skirmish at any time. You can queue for it and attack another lordship, or you could just stumble upon one in the persistent world. You're walking around, oh my God, there's a skirmish over here.
Yeah.
I'm gonna hop in, and
Pick
or
a
I just
side.
in my lordship, and all of a sudden these raiders come by and they want to steal from our stockpile,
Yeah.
right? So it's gonna make the world feel a lot more lived in and active without relying so heavily on the persistent territory conquest because it's so consequential. That can't be the only form of fighting. So tournaments and skirmishes and more casual PvP are going to allow players to still fight and be active and have fun in a more casual setting, while albeit still having some consequence on the kingdom and your lordship.
No, I think that's really interesting. I like that a lot because if again, if you're just a humble knight, you're kind of a casual player, you belong to a lord or a certain retinue, you'll basically get news from that lord. You know, like, hey,
Yeah.
king's called a crusade. I gotta muster as many people as I can. You want to
Right.
come? You know, and and also from the king's perspective, you got lords or dukes that might be, hey, these guys muster a lot of troops. I need to give them special treatment because
Right.
yeah, so because you want to keep them, which is all historical. It
Right.
sounds. I love any chance where good mechanics reflect history. I love it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we've covered a good amount of stuff. This is the type of game where there's so much depth and so much to cover that we could probably be here for hours.
Yeah. We
Um,
and we haven't even really touched on the economy part, but that's okay.
yeah, yeah, if you want to talk about it, we can. I
Well,
mean,
I want to just mention it briefly because it's a whole other branch. Um, Everything's going to rely on people producing resources and goods and materials and weapons. And it operates in the same way. There's going to be a supply of resources. Upgrading your land is going to cost stuff. If somebody damages your walls in a siege, you'll need to repair them. You need to go gather resources for that. So, ideally, going back to the historical part, every part of this feudal society comes together to make a functional kingdom. And if one part of the society is not operating well, then the kingdom's going to suffer.
and I assume there's going to be a tax on
Oh,
lords.
taxes are gonna be feudal. So a
Yeah,
lord will tax his subjects, and then the duke will tax his lords, and then the monarch will tax his duke.
right.
And if the tax is too high and you don't like it, then you might do something about it. So
You
it's
might
a
send a
balance.
message to the other king, like, hey,
Right.
what's
Yeah,
your
exactly.
tax rate? Yeah,
Exactly,
yeah,
exactly. And so there'll be a caravan system similar to skirmishes. So tax shipments and supplies making their way from lordships to duchies to capitals can be intercepted, sabotaged, stolen.
mm,
So you could wait on this hill. Oh, I know this caravan of wagons is going to
yeah.
come by with the latest
Three
grain
o'clock
shipment.
every time. Yeah,
Yeah, and so I'm gonna attack it, and maybe it's full of nobody's actively guarding it. It's full of shadows, and you've got this big army, and you sabotage it and take it, and or you can only take what you can carry, so you just take a little bit, so it's not super consequential. But stuff like that, instead of relying on like a ton of quests and NPCs to make the world feel lived in, I want the players to make the world feel lived in. Instead of forcing them to role play and do these things, I want to put incentives that smart players will figure out to do it themselves.
right.
So that when you're exploring and you encounter a battle, you know this isn't scripted, that there's somebody making a decision here. There's multiple people making decisions. And that's what's so exciting to me about Lionhearts. And that's why I can't tell you a game that's like that because I just don't know one that's going to do it to that depth, especially in a medieval setting. I don't even know of a single real medieval MMORPG that is historical. I mean, there's plenty of fantasy ones, but making an MMO in history is very difficult because the MMOs rely so much on fantasy mechanics for powering up and leveling. That's why we're taking a totally unique and organic approach because we think that's the way we can make it work.
Yeah, no, I think so it's a complete player-based economy. Is there, I mean, are you gonna ever act like the feds and like come in and maybe print money if it needs it?
No,
No, so it's
no,
completely, wow,
no.
that's, yeah,
It
that's
might we might start like when we're starting things, we might have to give it a boost just to see how the system works, like
right.
inject a little bit in the treasuries, and so forth. But the objective, by the time the game goes into full release, is total hands off.
Wow.
Meaning,
Yeah,
like if like maybe we have to ban like judiciary, like moderation has to ban somebody or something because of they broke, like they're doing something
right.
totally against the rules.
Yeah.
Outside of like just like if you set the tax rate to 100, okay, let's see what happens.
You're
You
not,
know what I
yeah,
mean? Like,
it's
good
not
luck.
gonna,
I mean, you're
yeah,
gonna destroy your kingdom, and
yeah,
so and I much prefer doing it that way. Or if a monarch is just terrible and he's a tyrant, I'm not gonna replace him. You gotta do it. Like, the
right.
players, you gotta figure that out. You're in a kingdom with a terrible king,
I think
rise up and choose another one.
probably within reason though, because I couldn't imagine someone getting to that level being a king and then just like trolling. I mean, that would be very bizarre, but I could,
You'd be surprised, but yeah, it does it's the system filters those people out at
right,
every level.
right.
You can't just haphazardly become a king. It requires a ton of work. It requires a ton of
Dedication.
circumstance and dedication. I wouldn't use the word luck because that's not something I personally think is taken into account. I think it's purely merit and
Right.
charisma. And it might be, you might rule with an iron fist and you might be cruel and people are afraid of you and that's why you're king. But I generally find the most successful kings are the ones that are most fair, that are most reasonable. The ones that are really, out to lunch and do all this crazy stuff don't last long.
Yeah.
And we've had years of experience with this in Lionhearts. And Lionhearts Crusade has a very sophisticated leader selection system. Um, and we're planning on just porting that right into
It's been well
the Steam
tested.
game.
Yeah.
It's been well tested, yeah.
So yeah, going back to the economy, I think gonna close on that. You know, some people might ask like who wants to manage the economy? Like who wants to be the merchant? But looking at games like Foxhole where you build factories and you collect resources and you don't even fight, I'm sure
Yeah.
there's countless players that would find
Oh, I think
joy.
it's gonna be one of the
Yeah.
most popular parts of the game because it's like a city builder,
Yeah.
except it's persistent, right?
Yeah.
And like it cross world. And so I might just want, oh, the king's commissioning a repair on this wall. I'll get this much favor or this much gold. I'm gonna go cut some wood and bring it over here. Or already have some supplied back at my house. And
Yeah.
the trade hierarchy is gonna have its own administrators. There's a trade master who regulates and sets prices, except he's a player. He's not a developer. And then
Right.
there's guild masters and magistrates and stuff that have to work with the king and the monarch to, figure things out. It's just like, we have the Fed and we have different things in the US government to manage money and they're going to regulate their own guild companies and stuff. And maybe they want to be more laissez-faire or maybe they want to, be more totalitarian with what they
Right.
regulate. It's up to them.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, that's really cool. So, and again, I think economy alone, we could probably talk for.
Oh,
Uh,
I did for
yeah.
10 days straight. Yeah,
Um.
easily.
So I guess to kind of conclude this interview, I think that the most challenging part, the most difficult part, I guess for you is to convince people to support the
Yeah.
Kickstarter. And I've seen ambitious games come and go. I've seen many medieval games not exactly like this, but in the same kind of open world. Um, you know, they've got basically it's like you said, it's an RPG MMO, and they start and then they just, sorry guys, like we couldn't do it. So what would you tell people that are on the fence, or they're worried that this is just going to be another project that just was a cool idea but never came to fruition?
Yeah. So, one, I would say look at our track record. We've been working on this for 10 years and we have never given up on it. This move to Steam isn't giving up on the Crusade game. It's trying to make it work better and actually achieve the full vision we wanted. No matter how much somebody supports this project, no one is going to be more invested in it than me and my team, and more committed to getting it to the finish line. And as excited as somebody might be hearing all these ideas, this is the stuff that kept me up awake at night for years thinking about and and planning. So first of all, uh, we have a duty once we raise this money to deliver, and that's something I take very seriously. And I'm aware that many Kickstarter projects do not deliver, and I don't know why. And every case is different, but that's not who we are as a company, and that's not the kind of commitments that we make. And once we commit to something, we see it through. And I can't promise that this game is going to be 10 million players and execute everything perfectly. Every game has its flaws. But what I can promise is that this game is going to get to the finish line. We're going to deliver on the things that we do commit to, and we're going to try to make the best medieval experience in a multiplayer setting that exists. And that's what we're going to do. And we have the infrastructure. We have a whole, I'm not at the office today, but we have a whole office. It's an indie studio. It's not massive, but we have connections globally. We have a huge team around the world that's committed to doing this. And so if you please wish list the Steam page, and most importantly, follow the Kickstarter and donate to it when it goes live, you're going to be helping support this mission come true. And we have various goals, depending on how much money we raise, of what we're going to deliver. And we're going to be very deliberate in how we manage that money and deliver those goals. And unlike some other companies, I don't know, they raise $8 million to make a medieval game. And the medieval game doesn't sound as as good, or doesn't have as much of the quality or some of the pre-visuals we've already have. You can see on our website from the cinematic we're making with our real assets. And yet they rate $8 million, and then 10 years goes by and there's no game. I just can't even, that just baffles the mind. I mean, I can't even imagine something like that. But first of all, we've been working on a shoestring budget for a decade as a startup. So we know how to manage money and we know how to make it deliver. This isn't just something coming together out of nowhere.
Right.
So we've been prepping from this from an administrative standpoint. We have a very sophisticated and organized team and system internally to manage a massive project like this. And we have before. The Lionhearts Crusade project is one of the most ambitious games on Roblox, if not the. It is extremely massive. It's got a larger world than the Elder Scrolls Skyrim, and that took a lot of time and a lot of commitment. And so I would say rest on our laurels with regards to actually delivering something there. And you can go around and play it if you wanna see that.
Yeah, yeah, and the more money you raise, I can imagine the better potentially the game will be, right? I mean, the more
Absolutely.
features, the possibly. Yeah,
We're
so
starting small depending on the budget. Like what we want to do is get that core gameplay loop implemented. The most important thing is not that the world is the biggest world ever. Okay?
right,
Like that's a really overstated thing. You can have a ton of fun in a world the size of this room, or you can have no fun in the world that's the size of Great Britain in a game, right?
right,
It like
yeah.
size is not as important as people think. We're going to scale it based on what the budget is and based on what's feasible, giving players enough room to operate without making it so big that there's nothing to do, and then we're going to scale it from there as needed.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. No, yeah, that sounds good. And I think I think, like you said, you've been working on the Roblox game for years and have never given up on it. So,
How
um,
long ago was it since you made the video on the Roblox game? It's been
I think
3 or
like
4 years,
yeah, three
and
years, I
we're
think.
still here making it. And
Yeah, yeah.
I
If
was just
anything, like every time I talk to you, it's like, hey, we're doing this bigger and better. It's like, whoa. So that's why. So I'm excited for this. Personally, this is not a paid sponsor for me to do. I'm doing this because I genuinely want to see this game made. I get excited for cool ideas, and I definitely recommend anyone who can support, if this is something that you want to play, of course support the Kickstarter. But even if you're on the fence, or maybe you don't have the funds, it's free to wish list it on Steam, which helps a lot too. um
absolutely.
but yeah, if you guys have any questions, I'm sure just leave them in the comments. I'm sure you'll be in the
I'll be
comment.
answering them for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I know we didn't cover everything, so you guys might still have questions. And who knows, maybe, we can do another interview about a very specific thing in the game. That
Yeah,
way
that'd be
we can,
great.
if we see something in the comments or something. But
The Kickstarter is a really good resource it outlines. It's not every documentation, but it outlines all these systems on a very high level, and then it goes in depth on a lot of them to kind of explain it. And I think if you read that after listening to this conversation, you're going to have a pretty good understanding of the core loop and what we're trying to make. It is ambitious, but it should be able to be boiled down into a single phrase, which is it's a medieval feudal simulator where you gain favor, ascend the hierarchy, and gain rewards.
Yeah, and you get out what you put in, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Exactly.
And yeah, so that, yeah, get all the info. Again, I have all the links down in the video description, so you guys can check that out. Any closing statements? Anything else you want to mention, or?
No, I'm super grateful for you for giving this opportunity. Like you said, not paid just because you're passionate about it. You've been helping us out for a long time, so I really appreciate that. And also, just everybody watching, appreciate it. If you don't choose to support it, I still appreciate you tuning in, asking questions. And if you do choose to support it, we're going to have rewards and peak features for people who choose to support the Kickstarter that you're not going to be able to get later. So it's a great opportunity to be involved with that. And I would just say check out our website for more info, check out our Kickstarter, and subscribe to the Kickstarter and the wishlist the Steam game, and that would be very helpful to us.
All right. Well, yeah. Hey, I appreciate you coming on and asking questions, and I'm excited to see how this develops. So
Thanks, man.
at,
Appreciate it.
at that, guys, we'll close it out. Again, appreciate everyone listening, and we'll see you guys real soon.
Thanks, guys. See ya.